Okay. So yeah, it's week 2, and we're looking at the Tibetan Wheel of Life as a backdrop. This extraordinary set of symbols that is contained within the Tibetan Wheel of Life. What does it all mean? How does it relate to our lives? Can we recognize ourselves on the wheel? So last week we looked at the center of the wheel, the cockerel, the pig and the snake, greed, hatred and delusion, and how they drive the whole thing round. And so we had a long talk about that, presentation and discussion from Arthur Siddy. So this week we're going to look at this second portion of the wheel. We're going to look at the dark path and the light path. What does it all mean? So let's have a look. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the image a bit bigger. It's a bit bigger. So here's one I did earlier. Yeah, just have a look. Can everybody see it? Yeah? Anybody like to hazard a guess? What's going on? What sort of impressions do you get from these two paths? Anybody got any ideas? Any thoughts? What does it all represent?
There's an upward moving
Yeah.
path on the left and a
Yeah.
dark downward moving path on the right.
Yeah. What does that suggest?
There is a heaven and there is a hell.
No, it doesn't mean that actually, but it's a good go. That's a good, yeah.
Can be ongoing. It's not a finite process. It can go round and round and round.
That's right. It's not a finite process. That's good. Okay. Any other thoughts, initial impressions, if you've not come across it?
Dualism.
Sorry?
Dualism. Polarization.
Dualism, polarization. Yeah, that's another good point. Good. Okay. All right. Well, what I'm going to do now, we're going to go into that in a bit more detail in a short while. But first of all, I've got a question for you. So I'd like you to split up into little groups of 3, and I've got a question for you. And the question is, where do you look for fulfillment in this crazy, divided world? It's a crazy, divided world which is admittedly very beautiful quite a lot of the time. But we often experience it as a bit mad. So where do you look for your fulfillment in your life? Is it in your family? Is it in your job? Creative activities? Is it money that provides all that for? Where do you actually find your fulfillment in your life? Okay, we're just going to do that for about 5 minutes now. So, what did we get to? What sort of ideas, what conclusions did we reach about where we look for fulfillment in our own lives? Anybody like to volunteer something? Lee, you look like you're going to say something.
Well, we started off with YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube, yeah.
Oh, name.
YouTube.
Yep.
Food, yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We said meditation can be good sometimes.
Meditation can be good. Right, okay. That's good to know. All right, good. Yeah, it can be, can't it? Yeah. Anything else? Anybody else want to? Shubhadasa.
I was going to say, actually, some of the things that we sort of checked was family.
Family, yeah.
Jobs, particularly if we're in of something that we find
That you like, yeah. Yeah.
Or even other jobs, actually, if
Yeah.
we're in really good moments.
Yeah.
Creative activities.
Yeah.
Nature.
Nature. Yeah, of course, yeah. These all sound like good things, don't they? Yeah. Anything more? Friendship, good. I was waiting for that. Good, that's good. Yeah, friendship's important, isn't it? Anything else? Anything else that you kind of noticed, concluded?
Learning.
Learning, good. I'm glad somebody said that. That's really good. Yeah, learning, that's another really great area of fulfillment, isn't it? If you feel that you're learning things all the time in life, then what a wonderful thing that is. I saw an interview recently with the, he's dead now, but the sitar player Ravi Shankar. Do you anybody remember him?
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And the interview was when he was in his 90s, and he said, "I'm still learning, still learning to play this instrument. I've been playing it since he was a child, and he was in his 90s." And so I thought that was wonderful, really, wonderful stuff. Okay, all right. I want to move on a bit. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes or something like that about karma. And what this dark path and light path really represents is the workings of karma. And this is a word that a lot of people think they know what it means. But you might not actually. You might not know what it is. So I'm going to say something about what karma is and what it isn't. And I'm going to talk about this image. Really, this image is quite simple, really. It's simply saying that as a human being, you will reap the fruits of your karma. It's as simple as that. If you act unskillfully, it's going to end up, coming out not very well for you. You won't find fulfillment. So if you're looking for fulfillment in, say, alcohol, then that's probably where you're going to go. That's probably what's going to happen to you. It's just a fact. And the light path is where that's showing the fruits of skillful behaviour, skillful action that's appropriate and healthy. That's largely the meaning of the image. It's not a particularly sophisticated image, but the teaching behind it, karma, is very sophisticated. In fact, it's incredibly complex. So I'm going to have to try and, summarise it in some way in sort of 20 minutes, really. That's all I've got. Yeah. So what am I going to say about the dark path and the light path? How does this relate to fulfillment? Well, it simply represents these two choices that we do have. We can grow and develop spiritually and as a human being, or we don't. Actually, if we don't grow and develop, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to end up having a terrible life, but it may not be the life that you would really like. There's an awful lot of people in the world who are not fulfilled, not happy with their lives. So the real meaning around all this is to do with volitional action. So you might remember the title of tonight was Volitions Lead to Fulfilment. Volitions are the path to fulfilment in your life. If you want fulfilment, you look to willed volition. So what is that? Let's have a look. So we've got this word we use called karma. Okay, let's see it somewhere. There we go. So karma means willed action, an intention that you have. And that's the really important part about karma that you need to get hold of. So at the moment, I'm doing a presentation on karma. And I want this to go a particular way. I want it to be effective and useful. I was asked to do this. I've said yes. I've decided to do it. I'm here. So this is a willed action that I'm engaged in at the moment. You have come to the Buddhist Centre this evening. Presumably that was a willed action. That was something that you decided that you wanted to do. If you haven't decided to come to the Buddhist Centre and you've just sort of woken up and realised that you're in a Buddhist Centre, that must be quite an interesting experience for you. I have actually heard about that sort of thing actually happening. I think it does actually happen. So, willed action is the crucial bit to remember. So that's the message. As I say, karma is a notoriously complicated subject, and probably at the end of all this, somebody will come up to me in the tea break and say, "Oh, you didn't mention this aspect of karma," and well, there just won't be time. There is so much to talk about. So I'll try and kind of overview it. So karma is all about actions driven by intention, and it literally means, the word we use is chaitana, Chaitana for world action. By the way, there's two forms of karma. There's karma with a capital K, and that really means the law of karma, what we call the Buddhist law of karma. And then there's karma with a small k, and that simply means all the little things that you're doing. It just means individual actions, karmas, the actions that you're doing. Like I say, it's all about intention. And the Buddha actually said this. I've got a little quote here. Intention, I tell you monks, is karma. So it says in the scriptures. So karma's not just about physical actions, things that we do with our body. It's also what we say or write, and also what we think and feel. So the body, there's a body, the speech, and there's the mind. And these three channels of body, speech and mind are a little bit like a musical chord. You know, a chord is made up of individual notes. And for the chord to sound good, you've got to get the notes in tune. It's a little bit like that with body, speech and mind. You've got to bring the whole lot together in a positive direction. So the concept of karma is closely tied to ethics. Karma is all about ethics. How you behave, skillfully or unskillfully. And the intentions here are of two types. So it's what we call akusala actions or unskillful actions. So that's actions that lead to harming people, taking the not given, sexual misconduct, untruthfulness, unmindfulness, all those sorts of things. And skillful actions are about the opposite. They're about metta, generosity, contentment, truthfulness, mindfulness, all those kinds of things. Incidentally, those qualities, of course you'll recognise the 5 precepts there, those qualities, they're qualities that are recognised, they're appreciated anywhere you go in human life. They're not particularly spiritual or Buddhist, they're human qualities actually, but that's called kusala, skillful action. So 2 kinds of intention, skillful and unskillful. So karma is not a rigid or mechanical process. Sometimes it's talked about in that kind of way, and that could be connected with Hinduism and Jainism. Sometimes karma is presented in that kind of way, but within Buddhism it's not. Within Buddhism it's flexible, it's dynamic, and it could be very, very subtle indeed. So here's a little bit of a definition of the law of karma. See what you think of this. Every willed action produces an effect that is eventually experienced by the agent, the nature of the effect being determined by the intention with which the action is performed. Can anybody work out what that actually means? This is a direct quote. Anybody work out what we're really talking about there? Any thoughts on that, Prakash?
What goes around comes around.
Yeah, there's something to do with that. It's about proportionality. It's as simple as that. It's about proportionality. So I'm very good friends with Dharma Siddhi. So say he goes, "Hello Saddharaja, how you doing, mate?" And I just ignore him and walk off and don't say anything to him. I think our friendship would survive that. I think probably the backwash from that, the effect of that would probably just be, oh, kind of what's up with Saddharaja kind of thing. So, but if I got some matches and I set alight to the Buddhist centre and burned down the whole Buddhist centre one night, I think the response for that would be really, really huge. Actually, it'd be enormous. So actions, the effect is proportionate to the weight of the action. That's how it all works. Yeah. Okay, what else do I want to talk about? Oh yeah, teacups, tea. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, so the results of your actions are not predetermined just by the action itself, but also by how you respond to the circumstances around you. So I want to use an example here of having a cup of tea. So I've got a hold of a cup of tea. Let's say I've got a cup of tea in my hand, and I'm talking to somebody, and just because I'm being a bit unmindful, I accidentally spill some tea all over Prakash. Yeah. So he's covered in tea, it's hot, wet, and he doesn't like it very much. Who would? But I then say, well, I didn't intend to do that. I'm really sorry, Prakash. I was just being really unmindful. So that's one thing. That's one level of doing something. But say I got a cup of tea and I deliberately threw it all over him. He's still wet with the tea, but it's quite a lot weightier, isn't it? The situation's quite weighty. I deliberately did that. That would be quite a strong thing. Similarly, if I was to get 50 pence or £1 and put it in a charity box somewhere when I'm out and about, it'll have some kind of effect. But say I'm a fireman and I go into a burning house and I save people's lives and get them out. That's going to have a much bigger positive effect. So you see, it's all about proportionality. In January, I spent most of January in India, travelling around teaching in different cities and centres, and I spent a lot of time on trains. And one of the difficulties for me there was to do with tea. I travelled with a group of friends, and the chai waller is coming along the train all the time, shouting out, you know, chai, who wants chai? And so I'd buy lots of chai for my friends. And on one occasion, I was just handing over a tray of chai, and the train kind of lurched like that, and everybody got tea all over them. And I didn't intend it. I wasn't being unmindful. It was outside of my control. I couldn't do anything about it. So you see how complicated things can get with all this. So karma is not fate or predestination. Yeah, karma is not responsible for all the things that happen to you in your life. This is one of the kind of myths about karma that people often feel. It's a natural process. It's a little bit like gravity. If I've got a cup and I drop it, it'll fall to the floor. It's a natural process. And, well, like gravity, it doesn't need some kind of creator being to administer that law. It just happens all on its own. So it's something that you can control in your life to some extent. You have agency. You can decide how to act. You've got choice. You can decide, you can take responsibility for the direction and the quality and the fulfillment of your own life through the law of karma. So that's what's represented by that dark path. And also, it's a law that underpins spiritual life because it's completely reliable. Within this crazy world, which is divided, unpredictable, and a bit mad at times, this law is actually very, very reliable. You can really rely on it in your spiritual life. It really will deliver. So within Buddhism, there's different kinds of karma. There's what's called residual karma, so that's connected with activity that you've done in the past. There's one called habitual karma. So that's the kind of actions which you're just doing endlessly every time, day after day after day. I was just noticing the way that I actually make tea. It's different from the way that other people make tea. I kind of mash the tea because I come from the north of England, and I kind of mash the tea, which people don't generally do in the south. But that's a kind of habitual karma. There's another one called weighty karma. And as you can imagine, that's where your action has a really, really big effect. So like murder, for instance, would be a weighty karma. But it's interesting that meditation is also reckoned to be a weighty karma. To have meditated even once in your life is considered to be weighty, positive karma. There's a fourth kind of karma called death proximate karma. And that's the kind of karma that decides when you will die. And of course we don't know when that's going to fructify, when that's going to happen. But, you know, it's out there, it's working its way towards us. So there's the karma that we have practiced in the past, and there's the karma that we're practicing now as we speak. as we act, as we think and feel. So to develop skillful action, to be acting skillfully in relation to all this, you do need mindfulness. You really do need mindfulness, because you need to know what you're doing. You need to be aware of what you're doing all the time. And I've got a friend who's here, Kashdeva, he's a concert pianist, and I love sitting in his little practice cabin, and he sometimes plays to me and I listen. I'm just so I enjoy the music, but I also enjoy how mindful he is of what he's doing. Because he has to be, he can't go off on a holiday somewhere in his mind. He's got to be really on the case for every note. And in a way, we have to be like that throughout our lives, because otherwise what can happen, we can fall into going into automatic pilot. We easily go into automatic pilot, and in automatic pilot, quite bad things can easily happen. Okay, so mindfulness and the mindfulness of breathing meditation is so important in relation to all this ethical action. Also, metta-bhavana meditation is so important, because what you're doing in metta-bhavana is you're wishing people well. You care about people, you want things to go well. So you want to match your ethical actions that really head towards that. You want to not harm people, and you want things to go well for them in relation to them, your actions. So skillful actions lead to fulfilment in life. So that's the kind of question, I think, it's something you can rely on. If you act skillfully in this way, you will have a better life. So talk to any experienced Buddhist who's been practicing for a long time, and they'll verify that with you. It does really affect the quality of your life. So yeah, karma doesn't teach, it isn't fatalistic, it isn't random. Yeah. It doesn't teach that everything that happens to you is a result of the workings of karma. It's not a general law of causality. There are other orders of causality to take into account. So if you've done a beginner's course here, you will have been introduced to the central teaching, doctrine of Buddhism, which is called dependent origination. So I'll just say a little bit about that and then I'll finish. So you might kind of remember, so there's karma there. You might remember that there's this incredible teaching, this great insight that the Buddha had when he gained enlightenment, that actually everything in this entire universe, everything entirely, is dependent on conditions, often many, many conditions. So whatever that is, whether it's a packet of biscuits or whether it's a black hole, whether it's a flower that you're holding in your hand or it's a range of mountains, and absolutely everything in between arises in dependence upon conditions. And take those conditions away and that thing ceases, whatever that is. And of course that includes us. We have arrived here in our lives in dependence upon conditions. And sooner or later those conditions will cease and we won't exist. So this is the great law of causality. But Buddhism also teaches that it goes on different levels in life. So if you're, there's a level down here called the inorganic level, the levels of physics and chemistry. If you're caught up in an earthquake, some of you are unfortunate to be involved in an earthquake, that is as a result of something bad that you've done. It's a result of something happening on the inorganic level, a process going on in relation to that. It's nothing to do with anything that you've done. So yeah, here's the law of karma, there it is. It's just one of 5 levels of what we call conditionality. So yeah, karma really pertains to our ethical lives. And it's worth just remembering that our minds are at the centre of all this. We heard that last week from Arthur City. It's all about the mind. The mind is where you decide, you make your choices, you are aware. You can decide where your life is going to go. And I've got a little reading here from the Dhammapada, one of those really early scriptures, which are probably the closest we've got to the words of the Buddha. And the first verse of the Dhammapada talks about this. It says, experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows, even as the cartwheel follows the hoof of the ox drawing the cart. Experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows like a shadow that never departs. So yes, that was a really inadequate and simple presentation on the whole area of karma. There's so much more that I could talk about, but I'll finish there because we're going to do a short meditation now. Okay, how did we get on? Did we come up with any ideas in relation to the question? What was the original question? How do we strengthen our volition? Set the conditions for our volition? How do we cultivate it? Any suggestions, any thoughts? Yep.
We decided to be playful and play with your failings and your successes.
Yeah,
Be a
yeah,
little bit-
good.
Be a little bit playful.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, play is important, isn't it? So important. We take ourselves so seriously sometimes. Well, I do. I need to lighten up sometimes. Anything more?
Mindfulness helps a lot.
Mindfulness helps a lot, doesn't it? Yeah, it really does. Yeah, it really helps, doesn't it? Yeah.
Self-awareness, just knowing what your tendencies are in the first place. Not
Yeah.
Yes, we aren't really aware of what might be available.
Yeah. Yeah. Knowing your tendencies, that's very important, isn't it? Just close this. That's good. One more before we...
Generosity.
Oh, I was waiting for that. Great. Do you want to say a bit more?
I think when we give to others, it brings out something in us that makes us want to do that more. We realise how beneficial it is,
That's right.
and seeing that the effect on ourselves and the effect on others
Yeah.
reinforces it.
So if you want depth in your spiritual life, generosity is one of the keys. Giving to others, because we often got a tendency in the West to look at the spiritual life in terms of what can I get from the spiritual life, what can it give me? But actually it's the other way around. It's what can I give to the spiritual community? And that's how you get depth in your spiritual life. So I'm glad you've mentioned that. So I wanted to say a few things make a few suggestions actually, about how we can strengthen our volitional tendencies. And yeah, I mean, these aren't hard and fast rules, but they're worth reflecting on. And the first one really is reflect that volitions are strengthened by practice and commitment to practice. So it's straightforward really. If you want to learn how to archery or bakery or all-in wrestling, whatever it might be, or pressed flowers, whatever skill you want to learn, you've actually got to practice. You've got to put the time in and the effort and be quite serious about it. Not massively serious, but you've got to put a bit of effort and commit yourself to that. It's as simple as that, and practice. And practice, that means a regular meditation practice. It means really thinking about the 5 precepts, reciting them, studying them, reflecting upon them. It means having an all-round Dharma life. And that will set up the volitions for you. Yeah, you need to sort of do a bit of Buddhism. You need to go on a retreat for a weekend and try it, and I think you'll be setting up the right conditions and the tendencies for you. It'll be normal for you to do these kind of things. I started meditating when I was 14. I was a kid, you know, and it really did feel weird, I must say. I remember my mother coming into the bedroom and saying, "What are you doing?" You know, kind of thing, just sitting there. So, but after about a year of doing that regularly, it was just completely normal for me. It was normal for my mother as well, and you know, it became what I did, and so I've done that all my life. I'm 66 now, and so you need to start actually doing something in relation to it. Second, what I want to mention, any questions about that before we go on to the next one?
One of our examples in our group was similar to this, but
Yeah?
in a secular area rather than practicing Buddhism, is being on a training course where
Yep.
where you studied models of behaviour.
Yeah. 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 It's the same sort of thing, isn't it? Yeah. So the second one is we do need good context for our practice. So obviously the Buddhist Center is a context for our practice, your practice. Going on a retreat, joining a study group, whatever it might be, buying a book and reading it and committing to reading it, it's all about context for practice. You do actually need that. It really does make a difference. If you want to go deeper in Buddhism, you actually do need to try and find the right context. But a lot of the time, we often think that the contexts are somewhere else. Well, I haven't got those contexts. How can I get them? They're expensive. I haven't got the time. So I wanted to tell you a little story here. In January, I was in India and teaching, and I went to a Buddhist center in a city called Bhopal. And I met all the order members and mitras there, and I was doing activities there. And I met a little woman actually called Priya, name, and I think she'd be about 45. Quite a small woman, and I was really immensely impressed with Priya. Everybody was so impressed with Priya. She was making so much progress with her Dharma life. She'd been going for about a year. And I found out that she had 5 children, which she was supporting on her own because her husband had abandoned the family. And she was working, the job that she did, she was a sewer cleaner. That's what she did during the day, and she did that 6 days a week. And she never ever complained about her life. The other thing is she lived in a slum. I actually went and saw where she lived. She lived in a slum. And I tell you, it was rough. It was really a rough place. But she was someone who had a very, very deep spiritual practice. When she sat in meditation, she went right into dhyanic meditation. And when she talked about the Dharma, you could see there was obviously a huge amount of devotion going on. I was deeply impressed with her. I felt quite humbled actually meeting Priya. But her circumstances were terrible in a way. But her approach to everything was to go to the Buddhist Center. The Buddhist Center in Bhopal is about the size of this room, and she was always there, and she cleaned at the Buddhist Center. She did the flowers. She baked biscuits for people at the Buddhist Center. She helped whenever. She said, "I just want to be generous. I want to kind of commit myself." She was actually creating all the conditions for a deep spiritual practice because she was giving of herself, even though her circumstances were very difficult. And I said to her, "How have you kind of managed to go deeply into the precepts?" And she said, "I used to complain a lot about my life, and I also used to do some really bad gossip about people that I knew." She said, "I decided to just stop all that." And she said, "I found that my conditions have really, really improved." So in a way, I don't think any of us will be in those kind of conditions here. We might have some difficulties and feel we complain a bit about our lives and how tough they are, but I can tell you there are people, and I've met quite a few Priyas in my time in India, And I can tell you there are people who've got immensely difficult lives, but they're able to go deep into the Dharma because they're setting up the actions, the conditions which lead for spiritual depth. So she had this habit that she never ever spoke badly of people, she only spoke well. And she said that had really changed her life, her mind, and the way her orientation. She used to complain a lot about her husband, who used to beat her and eventually left her. She just stopped complaining about him. He's gone, that's it. She was so appreciative of everything. So, and that was the other thing she did. She used to read the Dhammapada every day and reflect on a verse. And she would do it every day of the year. And so she really knew it all and knew it very deeply. So yes, we need good conditions, but also we can create them as well for what we've got in our own lives. She didn't have the internet. So yeah, the third one I want to mention is taking the 5 precepts seriously. So, you all know the 5 precepts, they're easily available, they're around, so you can reflect on them. And of course, the precepts really mean moving away from certain behaviours and moving towards certain behaviours. So just being clear what the precepts are. What are they really saying about your life? All those little areas in your life where you're trying to you're not actually taking it seriously enough or something. So, and I include myself in that. One of the little behaviours I've had to really made an extra effort to go forth from in recent years is money-saving little dodges, where I think I can, could I get these tickets for free? Or whatever it is. Those sorts of little things. Not very generous, really, not really in the spirit of things. I can be a little bit mean around money sometimes. So I need to go forth from that and cultivate more generosity. So take the 5 precepts seriously. They've been around for thousands of years. They really do change your orientation and your life. Yeah, as a more general point here, really, you might need to take a bit of a leap of faith. We live in a very cautious society, don't we, with scams and problems everywhere. And with Buddhism, you can take it very, very cautiously and say, well, I'm trying this, I might try that, but only if I feel okay about it, kind of thing. I need to feel safe. Well, in a way, the spiritual life is not safe, really, in the sense that you're going forth into the unknown to some extent. It can't really be put in any other way. The spiritual life, to really gain in the spiritual life, you do need to take a bit of a leap of faith sometimes. And I remember going on my first meditation retreat at Vajraloka when I was a very young man. I remember being really, really scared. And I arrived there on the train and went into this retreat centre and thought, I think I'm going to go home. I don't think I want to do this. It's like, I want to go home. But, you might have had that kind of experience. You're going beyond what's comfortable, your comfort zone. So have a look at what you think your comfort zone is. You might just need to sort of push beyond that sometimes if you're going to gain in the spiritual life. Finally, remember your mind is central in all this. Everything's about your mind. So you really need to look after your mind and not mess it up. And be aware of what you subject your mind to, if you like. So, hence mindfulness and metta. You can't really go wrong if you're practicing mindfulness of breathing and metta bhavana. You are really nourishing your mind and looking after it. And also taking responsibility. We do a lot of moaning. I think it was somebody was mentioning earlier about the French habit of moaning quite a lot and being very critical, and apparently it's a national sort of condition in France. I tend to think it's a British habit, actually, because we do quite a lot of moaning here, actually. And yeah, instead of moaning all the time, actually do something about the situation yourself, or and take responsibility for your life and your mental states. Finally, there's a little quote here from our founder, Saddharaja. You learn what it is that you are trying to do, in the process of trying to do it. So in a way, we're trying to do the Dharma, and we can't really know fully what that's going to be like. We have to try it, but we do need to learn as we're going along. So it's a good habit, when you've been on a retreat, you've been to a class, well, what have you learned? What do you feel you've learned? Or what are you in the process of learning in relation to that? You might see me very often on these classes. I'm taking notes every class I come to. Dharma City, we will be talking next week. I'll be taking notes. And I know all the material very well, but something might come up that I learn a little bit more deeply, and I want to make sure I've got a note of that, I don't forget it. So we're always learning, like Ravi Shankar. Okay. I think it's time for a bit of meditation.